Warminster is a historic market town in Wiltshire, southwest England, on the western edge of Salisbury Plain. Warminster has a claim to fame which brings people on pilgrimages from all over the world, where enthusiasts gather on the two hills that look down on Warminster to catch mysterious objects in the sky. Early on Christmas Day in 1964, a strange drone suddenly awoke postmaster Roger Rump from his sleep at his home in Hillwood Lane. This sounded like a violent rattle, like tiles were being ripped off of his roof. Meanwhile, at Nook Camp near the village of Heytesbury, soldiers reported hearing an intense sound that they described as a massive chimney being ripped apart, followed by a droning sound. That same morning, 5 miles away in Warminster, Mrs. Mildred Head was woken by the sound of giant hailstones battering her roof. The noise transitioned into a loud hum before fading to a faint whisper. At around the same time, a woman by the name of Marjorie Bye was walking to church and heard a crackling sound before being struck by shock waves so intense she was temporarily immobilised. The accounts from that morning marked the beginning of what would later be called the Warminster thing. 2 weeks later, Bill Marston was awoken 3 times that night by what sounded like coal being tipped down the outside of the wall. Rachel Atwell, the wife of an RAF pilot, was suddenly awoken at 4 a.m. by a strange noise, and when she got up to look outside the bedroom window, she could see a cigar-shaped glowing object hovering in the sky, stating that it was bigger and brighter than any star. Kathleen Penton had also seen the craft and described it as looking like a railway carriage flying upside down with all its windows lit up. Late evening in June 1965, 17 people observed the cigar-shaped object for 20 minutes, and by the end of the year, 3 people claimed to have taken photos of the UFOs. One day a flock of pigeons suddenly fell out of the sky, and when naturalist David Holton examined their bodies, he said that the birds appeared to have been killed by sound waves. The mysterious events attracted the media as news of the UFO sightings spread. The area of activity was pinpointed as a triangle bordered by Warminster, Winchester in Hampshire, and Glastonbury in Somerset. It is interesting to note that Wiltshire, specifically around ancient sites like Stonehenge and Avebury, is considered the world's capital of crop circles. Researchers believe that these areas may be associated with ley lines, ancient pathways believed to be conduits of energy. The geological composition of the area, including chalk, green sand and aquifers, may also play a role in the appearance of crop circles, as they are good conductors of electricity. The strange lights in the sky have been attributed to agitated animals, stalling cars, and electrical equipment going haywire. In September 1976, German parachutist Willie Gehan was living at Bishop's Castle in Shropshire and was driving to Netheravon in Wiltshire, where he was heading to the Army Parachute Centre near Salisbury. As the journey would take him almost 3 hours, he was feeling tired, so he decided to stop for the night and sleep in his car. He pulled over beside a farm gate near Upton Scudmore, which was a small village near Warminster. After locking all the doors of his vehicle, he suddenly woke up shivering in the early hours and found that the hatch door on the back of the vehicle was wide open, and he quickly slammed it shut. After covering himself with the blankets, he went back to sleep again, only to find that the same thing happened. Willie considered himself to be a light sleeper, and any slight noise woke him up, but on this occasion he heard no one open the door. He was now feeling uneasy and unsettled, and decided not to go back to sleep. It was now 3 a.m, so he decided to light his camping oven and make himself a coffee. Suddenly he heard a strange humming sound, like a swarm of bees, and suddenly became aware of a figure standing beside the farm gate about 10 yards away. The figure looked to be almost 7 foot tall, but he was not frightened, as he assumed it was the farmer coming out to check his animals. He called out to the figure, telling him that it was only camping there for the night, but there was no response. Then the figure shone a square-shaped torch at him from its chest. The light was a dark orange, and he assumed his torch needed new batteries. Willie continued making his coffee, and when he next looked up, the figure had gone. Then the humming noise came back, and he saw a large object lift off of the ground. Underneath the object, he could see a pink pulsating glow, where it lifted about 45 degrees off of the ground as he watched it disappear across the field. At this stage, Willie was not thinking that what he'd been witnessing was something out of the ordinary, and assumed the farmer was towing something up a hill. It was not until it became light that he realised there was no hill. He later discussed the incident with some friends who advised him to contact a ufologist because the figure he saw was probably an alien. Steve Evans and Roy Fisher from London had made regular trips to Warminster since 1971 to specifically search for UFOs, and were not disappointed. During their regular excursions, they'd encountered at least 30 strange objects and had 2 close encounters. The first encounter took place at the top of Cradle Hill. As they were looking at the night sky, a force field seemed to move through the grass like a snake and was crackling like static electricity. Evans could see it heading towards his friend's feet before veering to the right. Sheep in the field were going frantic. When daylight came, they could see that the grass had been flattened as though something had landed. That same weekend, the 2 men were at the top of Star Hill and had the distinct feeling that they were being observed. Evans quickly glanced over his shoulder and saw a figure in what looked like a white boiler suit with a white hat, running towards some bushes. Evans decided to pursue the figure, and although he himself was making a noise crashing into the bushes, the figure made no noise at all. The figure slowed down, looked around at Evans, and disappeared into the bushes. When Fisher ran after his friend through the bushes, he felt something brush up against him, but there was nothing there. But what he felt hit him was as solid as any man. He was sure he hadn't imagined it. On the same hill, Sally and Neil Pike also witnessed something strange as they were amongst a group of 8 UFO observers. They spotted 2 unidentified objects before feeling the air become suddenly warmer. Then 2 figures appeared who looked to be about 7 feet tall. They looked as if they were made out of smoke and could see their outline down to their waist. Neil decided to approach the figures, but couldn't see them as he got closer. But the other people saw him walk straight through them and out the other side. Then after about 30 minutes, they slowly faded away. Ken Rogers was so intrigued by what people had been seeing in Warminster that he moved there from London so that he could study the evidence firsthand. One night he came across an enormous white object that was blocking a track at Cradle Hill. Its shape was a classic saucer design, and as he drew closer, he got very hot and his hands were perspiring. He continued to walk through it and could see every detail of the object clearly, but everything appeared foggy. Ken Rogers was the director of the British UFO Society and has no doubt that UFOs are extraterrestrial forces. He does not believe they mean us any harm, and he never feared them, and they just want to study our progress. So why is Warminster such a hotspot for UFO activity? Could it be that the town is close to a large army base at Salisbury Plain and the territorial commander has even witnessed a cigar-shaped object which caused his car to stall in 1979? Historically, UFOs have been spotted at many military bases around the world, where there have been a lot of unexplained aerial activity over missile sites and nuclear silos. But why is Warminster so unique? Because there are far more important military sites around the world other than Salisbury Plain. There are other theories as to why they like to frequent the area, and one theory is that Warminster is very close to Stonehenge. Warminster itself lies at the crossroads of 30 ley lines. Ley lines are mysterious straight alignments believed to connect significant landmarks, particularly in the realm of New Age and spiritual thought. The theory suggests that these lines were recognised by ancient societies who erected structures along them. While ley lines are not widely accepted by academic archaeologists, They are believed by some to possess sacred energies and be linked to important sites such as Stonehenge and Avebury. Could the aliens be tapping the energy, or are they attracted to Earth because of them? If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to hit like. It really helps to keep the channel growing. And if you're new here, subscribe and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest videos. We've got lots of strange and fascinating stories coming up, and we'd love to have you along for the journey.
And now we have a bonus story for you. Born in 1862, Esther had a sad start in life. Her mother died when she was a young child, and her father's new wife did not like her or her younger sister Jane. Both girls were sent to live with their Aunt Olive and her husband Daniel Teed in a town called Amherst on the coast of Nova Scotia in Canada. The kindly couple had 2 small children of their own, making for crowded living in a wooden cottage with 4 rooms on each floor. By age 16, Esther had acquired a gentleman friend named Bob McNeil, who turned out to be no gentleman. One summer evening in 1878, the pair were out riding in Bob's horse-drawn buggy when he stopped and told Esther to come into the woods with him. Esther refused and slapped his face, which brought on a barrage of shouting and violence from Bob, whereby he ordered her at gunpoint to go with him. Luckily, they were disturbed by an approaching horse and cart and drove home in pouring rain. Esther was left soaking wet, scared and angry on her doorstep, and Bob left Amherst for good. For the next week, Esther bottled up her rage and fear, but then started a 2-year ordeal which seemed completely out of her control. Esther and Jane shared a bed, and one night, as both were drifting off to sleep, Esther suddenly jumped out, declaring that there was a mouse wriggling under the sheets. Both girls got up and examined the bed, where there appeared movement from right inside the mattress. Unable to do anything, they remade the bed and went back to sleep. However, the following night, they were disturbed by rustling coming from under the bed. This time, the noise seemed to emanate from a box filled with patchwork pieces. When pulled out, the whole box shot up high into the air, scattering patchwork pieces everywhere. Both girls were astounded, but not yet frightened, so Jane placed the full box back in the centre of the floor to have the same thing happen again. When they screamed, their Uncle Daniel rushed into the room, but didn't really believe their account of what had happened. The following night, Esther went to bed early, complaining of feeling ill. When Jane went up to join her, Esther suddenly flung herself out of bed, dragging all the blankets and shouting in panic, "What's happening to me? I'm dying!" Jane, on lighting the oil lamp, was horrified to see Esther's eyes bulging, her face bright red, and, most bizarrely, all her hair standing on end. When Jane called out for help, the whole family rushed into the room to see Esther start to swell up like a balloon, her skin burning hot while she screamed in pain. Then came a massive crashing sound, like a gigantic thunder crack. As the family stood frozen in horror, 3 more crashes rang out. But then Esther suddenly seemed to relax, her body size and temperature returning to normal, and she slept peacefully. 4 nights later, the terrifying incident reoccurred, with this time the bed sheets repeatedly flying off the bed and clumping in a far corner of the room. The Teed family members finally had to sit on them to hold them down. The occurrence again ended with a series of loud, thunderous crashes. The family doctor, Dr. Coreet, was summoned to the house the following night. He examined Esther and they sat quietly talking. Then he diagnosed nervous excitement, common, he said, in girls of her age. But the poltergeist again astonished the family. Esther's pillow slid silently out from under her head and floated up into the air like a balloon, then slipped neatly back into place. It then rose again a second time, and although Daniel Teed grabbed and pulled on it, he could not stop it sliding back again. A strange banging started, seemingly from under the bed. Dr. Coreet bent down, but could see nothing, then was aghast when an eerie thumping followed his retreat to the bedroom door. Again, blankets flew off the bed, and the family, by now hysterical, were then shocked to hear a sinister scraping sound coming from the wall above Hester's bed. Suddenly a message appeared on the wall in foot-high letters, looking as if they had been scratched in the plaster with a metal spike. The terrifying inscription read, "Esther Cox, you are mine to kill." Dr. Carit, now transfixed and staring in astonishment, seemed targeted when a piece of plaster detached from the wall and hurled itself at him. It came to an abrupt halt, then fell to the floor in front of him. The banging then started again, loud enough to shake the whole room, and continuing for 2 hours, until Esther fell into an exhausted sleep. When Dr. Carit visited the following day, he found himself pelted with potatoes flying out of nowhere, and he simply fled. That night the crashing, louder than ever, sounded like someone pounding on the roof with a sledgehammer. Onlookers started to gather around the Teed house to catch sight of the now infamous phenomenon within, sometimes even requiring police crowd control. The banging continued, but when Esther contracted diphtheria, strangely died down over the months that it took her to recover. The occurrences then resumed in an even more dangerous form. One night, Esther woke up Jane in a panic and said that she had just heard a ghostly voice declaring its intent to set the house on fire. Now taking any such threats seriously, Jane shouted for the family to wake up, although Mr. Teed was unconvinced, telling Esther that ghosts cannot light fires. Just as he spoke, a lighted match appeared from high up near the ceiling and fell onto the bed. For the next 10 minutes, the family raced about in hysterical attempts to extinguish a barrage of flaming matches that were falling on their furniture. This latest occurrence caused the townspeople to panic en masse. All of the houses in Amherst were built from wood, and the strong winter gales in that part of Canada could cause a devastating fire through the remote community. The town mayor soon took Daniel Teed aside and suggested that Esther may be less troubled by her ghost if she went to live elsewhere. Teed was outraged, saying that he treated Esther as his own daughter. However, the implication was that the townfolk might take the law into their own hands, with dire consequences for her and possibly the whole family. For the next 9 months, Esther moved from house to house in Amherst, but wherever she stayed, the malevolent presence would follow and continue its torments. She now worked in a restaurant in town, but frighteningly, knives and forks seemed dangerously magnetized towards her. A boy's pocket knife flew through the air and struck her neck, causing her to bleed, and on another occasion a shower of pins flew up from a table and became embedded in her skin. In July 1879, Esther went to live with a family named Van Amberg on a farm outside Amherst. It was hoped that the power of the poltergeist was weakening when occasional rapping on walls and windows were the only disturbance she encountered there. She also obtained a farming job nearby with the Davison family. However, that did not go well for her. The Van Ambergs found that items of clothing were going missing from their house, and these were later found in the Davisons' barn. Adding to Esther's woes, before the accusations of stealing against her were investigated, the barn burned down. She was now charged with both theft and arson, put on trial and found guilty, and sentenced to 4 months in prison. When several people in the town spoke up on her behalf, describing her tough life, the sentence was reduced to 4 weeks. Esther's short stay in prison, while seeming unfair and arduous for her, may have had one good effect. The haunting pervading her life came to an end, as inexplicably as it had begun. Esther Cox's story remains genuinely perplexing to paranormal investigators. It follows a typical pattern whereby teenagers are thought to be classic targets for such troublesome spirits who may need to draw on adolescent energy levels to actualize themselves into being. Sometimes the poltergeist activity is also triggered by a difficult experience, such as the attack on Esther by her boyfriend. The phenomenon was observed by many reliable witnesses, and her doctor stated to a fellow medico that he believed there was no fraud or deception involved. He said, "I could not have believed such apparent miracles had I not witnessed them myself."